The country should act now to get immigration visas going in their thousands to help G up GDP. Simon Bridges writes in his column this week for NBR. Simon, how's it going?
G'day, good to be with you.
Thanks for coming by. A couple of interesting conversations you've had over the last couple of weeks. Why don't you tell us more about what's been going on?
Yeah, I mean, look, there was a couple, but the reality is, we could be talking to kind of almost anyone, and what's true in hospitality and accommodation, and the broader tourism sector is that the sense I get, yep, they'd like more tourists, but in the end, it's not a question of demand. And actually, if the demand was there to be an issue, it's supply, and supply of one thing in particular, workers. Whether they're good, motivated, skilled, or none of those things, there just isn't enough of them. And so service providers are rationing, their accommodation, their services, the hours restaurants open because they can't get the chefs, the cleaners, and so on. And the point of the column really is to say, I appreciate a lot of people say this is true across the board. If we look at New Zealand right now, and I'm not necessarily predicting recession, but with a negative GDP number, with current account numbers that aren't so good, one concrete thing the government could do, in fact the new immigration minister could do, was get workers back in here for these sectors. Tourism was, after all, our biggest sector for a time, and it could be again, and that could be a real contributor to positive growth in New Zealand.
Immigration the only answer here? I mean, some people might argue they could fill some of these roles with local workers as well, or...
Well, I think if you listen to people on the ground, what they'll always say when they hear that is, good grief, we're at a situation of near full employment with where we're at. Doesn't mean to say there won't be someone out there who is good to go and ready for a job if they can be connected up. But I think the reality is what restaurants will tell you, what hotels will tell you, what tourism providers will tell you is the Kiwis kind of can't or won't that are left do these jobs. And so that makes this very much not a domestic problem, not a problem of tourism per se. It is plain and simple an immigration problem. And the point I'm making is that immigration problem is a clear link to our growth GDP problem that actually Minister Michael Wood, the new minister, could get his skates on and do something about.
You've mentioned GDP a couple of times. We also had consumer confidence hitting record lows in the latest Westpac McDermott Miller survey. I mean, are we sure that demand is there and this is just a supply problem?
There's no doubt from the people I'm talking to that there's a sense of that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting tourism's perfect and everything's going to be great. The reality is, and Neville Gibson's done good work on this in the NBR around the issues for airlines and airports gearing up, and they've got capacity issues as well, some of those related to workers. But I'm suggesting to you of these issues, supply of labour and demand for it, that supply one is the bigger one. In a sense, if you get the workers, they can and they will come, and they'll come back. If you don't get the workers, actually, and people coming from offshore, but New Zealand as well, are having increasingly poor experiences at restaurants, retail, and so on, well, they won't come back.
The government was warned about this as well. The sector has been making a lot of noises. We've got a new immigration minister now, Michael Wood. I mean, what are the expectations maybe of getting a more receptive ear on some of this stuff?
Was it say in the column, I think Michael Wood is one of the more talented ministers they have. He is someone of energy and industry. And so the hope is Chris Farfoy retiring, Michael Wood coming in. Maybe actually he'll read the column if he's an NBR subscriber.
I'm sure he is.
Bound to be, and he'll have a sense of this, and he'll understand actually if we want to not tempt fate, we want to have positive growth, we want to get those current account numbers, the confidence numbers back. Immigration is kind of key to it all. And look, I make a final point on all of that. It's not just in the sectors I've mentioned. I obviously understand that, although they're at an acute end of it. It's trucking, it's ICT, it's probably most sectors in New Zealand that if they could, they would take on more workers.
Simon, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.